With a slow pace, he looked for the exit, placing himself in the doorway. He showed his presence in the clear rectangle open to the afternoon and looked at himself like a closed book, without a cover, without a title, never read and a prisoner of dust and abandonment. Locked in a small space, limited by the squalor of others, victim of a world that never lets the unwary see its real figure, always crouching like a beast, behind an ambiguous disguise, similar to everyone's face. A world with the appearance of wool and velvet in which it hides its corrupted remains along with the decomposed atmosphere of its aura. A polluted, stained, and filthy world which always pursues the truth, so that if it finds it, it paints it the color of a lie. His work in favor of the most vulnerable was positive, but many things had happened after his validity expired, creating the circumstantial space where his emulators would place the record, with a diagram of his actions in which all his faults were numbered, which they were required to be in the public domain. Each and every one of the coreligionists had to be informed, through an unprecedented malicious announcement, of the criminal charges that the society made up of many people without legal knowledge had to attribute to them. A crowd made up of all kinds of individuals, among whom imbecile kleptomaniacs, illiterate thieves, crude bloodthirsty murderers, lying rapists, street traffickers of controlled substances, and fortune launderers, along with others who had to be carried away by ambition, would stamp their presence. Cheap defectionism and the desire for profit, which had to cry out for his head, an action after which it would be possible to wash away his own guilt. But he was not a criminal who had perpetrated a genocide. He was not a murderer or a careless driver who with his recklessness brought mourning to the families of his people. He was not a pimp, pedophile, or rapist, like those who could be counted in large numbers among the conceited plaintiffs and sympathizers of the public ministry, erected in a fierce media jury lacking an honest vision of what is correct. Since he was little, he lived very close to his own concept of life and death. I thought that, while they die, people are only good for living, and while they live, they navigate carelessly in the vicious lake of death. That's what I thought, although it wasn't very clear about anything, but he understood that circumstances had configured him in a different memory, to which he did not belong. He had not yet forgotten that he was a very important person who fell into disgrace due to the magnification of the details of his achievements, considered objectionable by his adversaries. He flipped through the already blurred pages of his conscience, looking for the reason for everything, and didn't find it. He looked back, scrutinizing every space of yesterday, examining the hermeticism of each door closed by circumstances, where a little of his memory remained stagnant, and he only found the emptiness that filled his emptiness, the abysmal gap of his lack, the certainty of his innocence, and the presence of nothingness that filled the absence of reality. His figure, in the rectangle of the door, open to the afternoon, seemed like the work of a painter captured in the twilight, which was disappearing with the shadows. He asked absent-mindedly what the meaning of nothingness was, and perhaps he could also explain what he had done or not done to deserve the ostracism to which the same society that once acclaimed him intended to condemn him. I wanted to know more. He didn't understand why he was still in the doorway, watching the day escape and the night engulf him. Yeah, I wanted to understand why, after having promoted the teaching of reading and writing to so many illiterate people, after having worked shoulder to shoulder with farmers promoting sufficient agricultural production to establish food security for all the people, especially the most vulnerable, they did not dare to write the history of their good works, as they did with those they considered bad. Splattered with carrion, the scribes sold their pens, like crude merchants, to the new established government, demonstrating their real appearance as dunghill ghouls, flattering the hypocrites, turncoats, and pimps, without noticing their grotesque appearance, like pigs rooting in the mud. In the opacity of their sentience, their frustration stumbled in search of clarity, to walk on a future dissolved in the collective memory of times already past, which, if it had not been for the errors committed, would have transformed the past into the future and the now into a new verbal tense, whose meaning had to be, and always possible, fair aspiration if they could understand it, something as normal as life, as possible as peace, as volatile as love, as thankless as hunger, and as imperfect as the perfection of the children of God. Before, when his body still followed the path of his mind, he used to think about precognitive phenomena revealed in premonitory situations that were unraveling his psychic engineering. He was anxiously looking for the door to his sanity which was closing. As that door closed, his lack of self-knowledge widened, but in his confusion he could distinguish so many faces disfigured by the notch of ambition, that just by looking at them they changed the meaning of everything, the intention of things, transforming the positive into negative, the good into bad, the clean and dirty, the conspicuous in clumsy, and white in black. He could be heard talking while he slept, answering questions to people who interacted in his dreams, recounting experiences and divulging concerns. In one of those dreams he was heard saying with concern, "I don't remember his physiognomy, but I don't see the reason for forgetting, because I was generally very good at remembering faces and gestures, roads and landscapes, conflicts and cities. I perceive the forgetfulness of the remembrance of executed plans and projects, which on several occasions wanted to be imitated by people I do not remember, from countries and localities that I cannot remember. It is obvious that my memory is at a disadvantage compared to those silhouettes that I do not need, due to their common appearance, similar to so many things that I do not remember now. However, when I think about the absence of his face, the images are drawn in my diffuse imagination like a nightmare where a steed with the face of an eagle interferes with other unlikely figures that appear and disappear in sequential order, showing the colors of the spectrum, how by the art of a primitive artificial intelligence in constant evolution, where animals respond to strange catalogs, with reactive characteristics that generate constant conflicts, giving dimensional possibilities to giant winged rats, with brown and black eyes, devouring a huge decomposed shark among the algae, wearing colorful ties while they hide behind huge migratory rocks that change shape, missing the blue of the sky reflected in the green sea, incredible gray clouds that flourish and cordially agree on the new meaning of the past, present, and future of the most recent verbal conjugations, designed by the Academy, to compensate the selfless people who have donated their intelligence to make way for a global intelligence captive in fashionable communication devices where behind a fictitious name it would be kept forever together with the logical order of things and the principle of freedom lost among algorithms. There was a strange confusion capable of misplacing the existing cultures in the country, giving a different connotation to everything possible. After that event, the conceptual meaning of the known and the unknown became equal, the limiting lines of meaning became confused, and the differential characteristics were lost. From now on, positive and negative mean a single concept. The masculine and feminine words were democratically incorporated into an unprecedented linguistic association to strengthen their semantics and reorient their lexical meaning. In the face of so many innovations, nature was stripped of its original conception, establishing the artificial empire in each of the human functions, including metabolism. The distortions continued their course, dispersing the animal onomatopoeia. The dog sang, the cats barked, the birds neighed, the legion cawed, the rats meowed, and the horses roared. In the future, vital functions will follow different paths. Food would be taken through the navel like fetuses, because the human esophagus became useless due to bad habits acquired. Procreation in a general sense became hermaphrodite in order to ward off gender violence and avoid femicide, which had spread in the country in recent times. Since then, relating emotionally was more problematic because everything depended on a personal scheme. People had to fall in love with themselves, ask for each other's hand, and marry themselves. The changes were so critical that people forgot to live, and many went to the point of considering their self-birth as well as their self-disappearance. He continued dreaming out loud, talking in his sleep and sleeping awake. When he woke up, no one had any doubt that he was crazy, but his only goal was to be understood by the new generations for whom the names of things, the sense of correctness, and the reasons for elegance had changed. Meanwhile, he felt himself walking straight towards an eternal sunset that never arrived, included in a rectangular world with a narrow base and infinite height, heading towards the afternoon, waiting for the night that would take charge, with great pleasure of dissolving his figure in the darkness. The sunrises had become scarce. The new routes of the sun were unsolved unknowns, irreversible paths that did not contemplate a return or an end, inserted in a late procedural contingency, which no longer had anything to do with substantive justice, since the meanings had melted by the heat of the long sunset and the inadequate interpretation of the law. Unfortunately, what people remembered about the formation of the world was going to disappear along with the legend about the inventors of fire, writing, war machines, the principles of industry, agriculture, and livestock. The heirs of the Phoenicians and influence peddlers, the cartographers and designers of satellite programs who had served as the basis for the establishment of geopolitics, would also disappear, making it easy to point out places conducive to mining exploitation and natural predation. The glorious history of small towns would disappear along with the names of their heroes. National character would become a privilege of economically powerful countries. Likewise, the guinea pigs, the pharmaceutical shops, and the creators of Homo sapien, the supporters of solidarity and the inventors of hypocrisy, who had not been able to protect themselves with the current algorithms, would disappear because not a single one could be found who could admit so much invective. Deceptive, the scholars and historians, spreaders of lies and slander, also began to swell the ranks of those who were desperately seen collecting the honor of those they slandered, and the lies spread like wool scattered by the breeze. Confusion no longer reigned because there was no one to whom. It was time to judge those who, in the name of good, had done so much evil. To the cursed farmers who had kidnapped and falsified the goose that laid the golden eggs. To the evil hunters who had shot down the golden bird, the bluebird, the carrier pigeon, and the phoenix. To the goat rapist whose offense had gone unpunished, the birds of prey because they always frequented carrion, and by eating the rats they caught the rabbits. To the church mice who would not be accepted because they smeared the sacred sacrificial tablecloths with human excrement dragged between their filthy rodent paws. The great temples, already converted into burrows, were also in the path of the agonizing afternoon. We were facing the end preached so many times by pastors, exegesis, priests, and holy fathers to motivate their collections, so necessary to pay in advance for their vacation in heaven and ensure the conquest of eternal life. Meanwhile, with an apathy, he would continue to stand in the doorway, open to the afternoon, waiting for the night that would plunge his silhouette into the empire of shadows.